Was there a movie scene which like blew your mind? Literally, you were like,
Oh boy, that's I think one of my
where
favorite.
where you were like, oh my God, like how did they come up with this stuff?
Yeah, well, okay, well then that would be okay. Well, here again, I'd have to go back to I was a kid.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm like 12, 11 years old. I'm watching West Side Story, and if you've ever seen the original, where the camera's at ground level, just the way it opens. I don't know if have you seen the original West Side Story?
No, I have seen the
Or
remake.
the opening just starts with a view of Manhattan. It slowly does an aerial shot over the tops of these buildings till it stops, and then it zooms in on the basketball court where this one the Jets are. And that just here again, as a kid, I was just like, I had never seen that done before. That was the first time seeing that. And then later on, the use of color, the use of focus effects, that are done. Here again, you're talking 1964. I mean, or 65, whenever it came out. This is mind blowing stuff. Uh, so that would be one. Uh, I don't know, something that, how did they do it? I think one of the, and I found out later, unfortunately, how they did it, which was too bad because I sort of
It
shattered the
it
illusion.
it it ruined the magic. It ruined
Yeah,
the
yeah.
magic.
I don't know if you've ever seen, what is it, The Secret in Their Eyes? uh, the Argentinian version, not the updated American version, uh, about the rapist who gets arrested. But they
Trigger warning
arrested.
here.
Hmm?
Trigger warning here.
Yeah, well, but there's a scene where they finally nab the guy at a soccer stadium, and it's
Oh.
presented as all one long shot, and it's
Ooh.
so great because it goes, from zooming into the stadium, into the stands where the cops are looking for him, and then they see him and they chase him. And of course, he's, going all around the stadium, and then they end up. I mean, if you ever see that scene, it, well, it's almost better than the long shot in Goodfellas. But then, of course, I found out later that, well, it wasn't all one shot, which is what
Mm.
Scorsese
That
did in
that's
Goodfellas.
that's what I wanted to ask you. Like, do you think that sometimes those long shots are
Yeah,
like,
because when I first saw it, I was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" And then I found out later what they did was they used
mm,
computer stuff, and but I mean, it doesn't detract from the power of the scene, but it sort of like I was saying, "Oh my God, this is even better than Scorsese's, you know,
Goodfellas.
long shot in the restaurant in Goodfellas." Um, but so that was one. Um, I don't know. Like I say, to me, just seeing West Side Story for the first time as a kid, which is the first well-crafted movie I'd ever seen, was just mind-blowing. And it just, like I say, it hooked me into movies for good. I started really just getting into them and studying them and that sort of thing. Yeah,
I
so
think
that would probably
for me, when I had that feeling was when I watched Now You See Me for the first
oh,
time.
okay. Which yeah,
No, but the one with the card shot and at the
mhm,
security. Wow, like
yeah,
my mind was
how
blown.
they do, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is funny watching those things. Now, I think one of the best scenes I've ever seen was the Godfather, the baptism scene where Michael is killing off,
Oh,
and that the intercutting between the baptism and then the killing of the other families. It's like it's funny
yeah.
because he's sitting there going, "Oh, I renounce Satan. I renounce all his temptations." Meanwhile, he's wiping all these guys out. Um, but also, if you notice, like just as they're pouring the water on the baby's
Mm,
head, you see the it cuts to the guy putting the shaving cream into his
That's
hand before
yeah.
the guy's face. And then, when they show, I mean, it's just really well crafted intercutting. I was
And
just like,
it's
this is,
so seamless as well. Like you
yeah,
you're at this baptizing scene, and then there's a cut and you're at this like
yeah.
wiping
And then
out
you're,
human being scene.
yeah, blowing these guys away in elevators
Hmm.
and revolving doors and stuff like that. It's like, this is really well done. I think another one like that too. I don't know if you ever saw the Harrison Ford Fugitive. Um,
Um,
the first Fugitive that was done with Harrison Ford. Um, and I really loved the scene. Are you familiar with the movie? Have you ever seen it?
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay. But it was a remake of the TV show The Fugitive, and they did it with Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones was the marshal who was after him. But there's a really great scene in
Ah,
there
it's
where,
it's from 2013
yeah, yeah.
with the thrill
Or
of
no,
the
I think it was from
chase.
the 90s. I think The Fugitive
Oh,
came out in
okay.
the 90s sometime. But
Hmm.
there's a really great scene of cross-cutting, intercutting, or cross-cutting there. Another one that was really well done and even more fascinating when you find out how they did it was because this is years before CGI. The Jeff Goldblum Cronenberg version of The Fly. I don't know if you've ever seen that one,
You
where
said
he's
Jeff
on.
Goldblum. Okay.
Yeah, got Jeff Goldblum as David Cronenberg put out the movie. Which anytime you get David Cronenberg, you know the movie's going to be gross and icky. But yeah, that's Cronenberg. But there's a scene where he's on the ceiling and Gina Davis is looking up at him on the ceiling, and then he crawls down the wall and onto the floor. And I found out later the way they did that was they actually built the room on a turnstile, on a revolving room. So
Hmm.
they just point the camera at him and just follow him as he's going down. And it looks like, he leaps and grabs onto the wall and he just sticks there and then he crawls down the wall and jumps onto the floor. Very well done scene. That one blew me away too. So those would be the ones that really stuck out to me.
That one sounds very interesting. The
Yeah, well, that
fly one.
that
Fly
version of
one.
Fly is very interesting too because it came out. Did it come out in the 90s or I think it came out in the 80s? I think
Yeah,
it was
it
in the
was 19. I just saw it.
yeah.
Um,
It seems to me it was like 86.
1986. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
R-rated.
but that one and John Carpenter's The Thing, his version of The Thing, which is 1983 or 82, I believe. But those were basically allegories for AIDS. Because remember, we were just learning about AIDS at this point, and the idea of this transmission of this thing that alters you completely through your bloodstream,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was the brilliance of those two movies was bringing in these two old 1950s standard sci-fi movies and then equating them with AIDS was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it's just very well done. And they were well done in and of themselves, too, because the effects had gotten better. You could do much more on the screen than you could back in the 50s. Uh, so, but yeah, if you ever rewatch those, think of those as an allegory for what AIDS was. It
Mm-hmm.
gives you a whole different look of the thing.
Speaking of AIDS, have you seen Bohemian Rhapsody?
No, I haven't. I'm not really now. That's when I'm not big on biopics.
Oh, okay.
A lot. I
Because
don't.
because you had mentioned David Bowie, I was like, oh, did he see like Monage Daydream?
Yeah,
You
but I just biopics just outside of Patton. I was like, I can take them or leave them.
or the
I saw the
or
Churchill.
the pianist.
Well, the pianist, yeah, but I see that more as a Holocaust movie than even though it's
Mm.
based on actual events. To me, it's more of that period. than anything else. Uh, I saw Patton, and I guess you could say, I've seen like Gettysburg, which is kind of a biopic, I guess, but it's more all encompassing. Um, I don't know what bio movies. Now, like Tora Tora Tora, I love the movie about Pearl Harbor from the '70s. I think that's one of the greatest of the here again of war movies because it is fairly historically accurate, very well done. Uh, which, by the way, that also reminds me, I thought Midway was very well done. Uh, I don't know if you saw that one, but
Uh,
that was a
Nope.
pretty good.
No, I haven't. Okay, I'm
Oh,
adding
okay.
it to my list. My list is like longer and longer, getting longer and longer.
My only problem with Midway was, and this is, and you mentioned it before, it's one of the problems with CGI is it you can tell when it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it was so reliant on CGI in a lot of the scenes. I was like, but the human
Why?
scene, the scenes about, because what I liked about Midway was it actually covers Pearl Harbor, the Doolittle raids, and Midway pretty well in one movie. I was like, that's pretty impressive to be able to capture all three of those events, which were major events in the Pacific theater of World War II. Uh, that's pretty impressive. But the 1970s Midway is obviously more detailed, but it's also a little bit cheesier too. Uh, although I will say this, I think the 1970s may be one of the better decades for movies. I think the
I
movie,
would, well, I cannot like say that because I wasn't around
yeah,
that
you weren't
then.
around.
But I would say best decade was 2000s. I would say that.
There was some good stuff.
Yeah,
Uh, I'm
some
trying to
good
think.
stuff.
Yeah, I mean, but I think the '70s. I mean, and here again, we're talking about Tarantino.
Mm-hmm.
You look at how much he relies on that decade for some of
Mm-hmm.
his source material. Uh, like I mentioned, the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 clearly influenced Reservoir Dogs, clearly influenced Inside Man. Uh, I mean, that decade, you had both Godfathers came out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you think of the comedies that came out. I mean, the Monty Python movies, Holy
Oh
Grail,
yeah.
Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein. I mean, you just go through the laundry list, and half of those movies you couldn't make today. Nobody would dare
Yeah.
put those on screen.
Yeah.
So
It's so
it
true.
was a it was a real daring time, and people were really experimenting with stuff. And you think about it, George Lucas. I mean, the original Star Wars comes out in the '70s. Jaws comes out
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
So Spielberg, Lucas, all these guys have come out of that decade. So it really is, I think, which thank God, because I hated the music of the '70s. So
But the
thank God the
movies
movies,
were
yeah, thank God
greater.
the movies were the salvation. But you know, I shouldn't blanket that statement. It's just disco came out in the '70s, and that was enough to ruin the decade musically for me. Uh, but I was not a fan. Um,
I
in
can
fact, I
hear
have
that.
to laugh because I don't know if you remember, but in the '90s there was this revival of
Mm,
disco, and everybody was
yeah.
having '70s parties and stuff. And I remember some of my students saying, "Oh, you must love this." I said, "Man, I hated it the first time around. Why would I like the recycled version?" So yeah, until the Clash came out in '78, '79. Boy, that was a pretty bad decade for. I mean, look, you had Joni Mitchell, Jackson Brown, some, ZZ Top came out of that decade. So there was obviously some good music, but overall, everybody was focused on disco and that. I was like, oh God, heaven
Oh
save.
God, not again.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, uh, but yeah, but I think you look at the '70s. boy, there was some tremendous stuff that came out of that decade. And like I say, I think the big thing about it is that you couldn't do those movies today. That nobody would even greenlight them. And yet they were
Mm-hmm.
some of the most successful and iconic movies around. So, yeah, 2000s. Yeah, there was some really good stuff. Unfortunately, I mean, I shouldn't say it that way, but unfortunately for my movie habit, our son was born in the 2000s, so that sort of cut back on our movie intake pretty dramatically.
Mm.
My wife and I used to go 3 or 4 times a week to the movies, back in the 90s.
Wow, like it's so crazy that because you cannot do that in today's age because of the inf what's called of the
Well, the costs involved, yeah,
yeah,
but
in
no, but
inflection, yeah.
we went all the time, and then of course once Gabriel was born, that was our focus. So it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we used to subscribe to theaters. We go to see live theater. We go to the opera all the time, concerts. That's gone now. What can I do? Uh, but anyway, so yeah, in the 2000s, my movie diet became pretty restricted, and has been ever since. But anyway, but yeah, the 70s would definitely be my favorite decade for movies. Uh, Although, yeah, there was some good stuff. I mean, you look at the 90s, you had My Cousin,
Uh-huh.
Some of those movies.
You had Back to Future, I
Back to the
believe.
Future was
Back to
back.
the
No, that was well, the
No,
first one was 87 or 88, I think. Maybe. I think
maybe
the first one came out in the late 80s. Uh, but,
oh
well,
yeah, it
yeah, then,
was 85,
yeah,
the
it was,
first one,
oh, mid 80s,
and
okay.
then 89,
Yeah,
and then 90, and then 21. But that's, I
okay.
guess, something else. I don't know.
But, but anyway, I mean, every decade has. Yeah, it's funny. I mentioned earlier, I don't tend to like remakes of movies. One
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see this movie redone because of the CGI that you could now achieve in it. But the only thing is, it would it would only work if the studio could resist the temptation to change the story, and I know they can't resist that. So, unfortunately, you know, but I don't know if you ever saw Altered States. I think it came out in 81 or 82. And with the CGI you have now, you could do some amazing stuff with that. But don't screw with the story. The story is fine as it is, doesn't need any help from anybody else. It was one of the best written stories, I've seen in a while. I
Well,
don't know
I
if you've ever.
haven't watched it,
Oh, Altered
but
States, but
I'm going to add it to my list.
it's actually a variation on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's what inspired it. Was Patty Chayefsky wrote it, and he was like, here again, Taylor Sheridan. You want to talk about great writing? Patty Chayefsky wrote, he did Marty, he did Hospital, he did Network. I mean, he's done some really tremendous writing. But he wrote Altered States as a novel. The novel came out in '79. I remember that, and I
Oh,
read it, and I was like, man, when they make this a movie, if they do it right, it's going to be great. And it was. It was very well done for its time. But the effects you could do now, because the guy, like I say, it's just a variation on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Uh, so I'll leave it there and let you watch it sometime because it's a mind blowing story, very well done and very interesting, I think. But which I had to laugh because when I went to see the movie, the girl at the theater, when I bought the ticket, she goes, "Oh, it's just about some guy taking drugs." I said, "Well, it's a little bit more than that." Since I'd read the novel, I knew the story. I said, "Yeah, it's not quite just some guy tripping out on LSD. Okay, this is a little
it's
more
something
special."
else.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, um, but anyhow, I don't know what else can I tell you. I, Well, let me
Yeah.
fire some questions at you. What's your favorite movie?
Um. mm, Yeah, I would say Now You See Me.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh, because like it was, I maybe because I watched it in theater, and then it was such a cool like experience to watch it, and then the like tricks, and I love
Yeah,
Morgan
and it's really a
Freeman.
crime movie when you get right down to
Yeah,
it. So
yeah,
it's
and it like blew my mind how
that's
one they
funny.
revealed everything, two
Yeah.
it like all like Daniel Radcliffe was in that movie, like Hulk was in that movie. I was like, oh, all my favorite actors are in
Yeah,
this
Edward G.
movie.
Norton, that's right, Edward Norton. And was Christian Bale in that one?
Um,
No, no, he was in the other one. He was what was it? The other movie about magicians. I forgot it now, but
Prestige, maybe.
Prestige, yeah, the Prestige. That was Christian Bale. But
But
anyway,
I really like
that's not a bad choice, actually. That's a pretty good. Which, by the way, I've always said this is something you want to understand a person. Two
Mhm.
things to look at:
Okay.
find out what their favorite movie is and why,
Mm.
and then look at their bookshelves. See what books.
Oh,
That will tell you more about a person's personality than they ever will.
okay. So you can't see mine, unfortunately, but I have a few thriller books and crime
Oh
books
yeah,
here. There's this one book called The Other Child by Charlotte Link.
yeah. Is that Rampling? Or no,
Excuse
no,
me?
it's not Rampling. No, I was thinking of some another writer. Okay,
No, it's
I've
Charlotte
heard of that.
Link, and I
Oh,
love it. I cannot read it during the night, obviously, because I get scared.
yeah.
um,
Oh, okay.
but because it plays in a small town, and the basically it like jumps from a small town to a big city, and then the protagonist, she is this girl. She has this brother. They're like poor. They come into this small town, but you clearly know, have this feeling that something's off,
Uh huh. Yeah, that's neat.
and yeah, and then the thriller crime aspect comes into the
Oh,
mix.
okay. I'm reading a book called Miss Lucy. I forgot the writer's name, but Miss Lucy it's based on Lucy from the story Dracula, and
Oh,
it's
cool.
it's kind of a fictionalized account of Bram Stoker, because
Hmm.
he modeled her on this woman he was obsessed with. So it's neat because you're learning about Bram Stoker at the same time you're reading this kind of cool story. But
You
there's another
mentioned
one.
you
I
mentioned
can't remember who.
Renfield. So
Yeah, yeah,
did
Renfield.
you like it?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Like I say, it
But
was it was fun.
like in a vampire adaptation, where would you rank it?
Oh, it's like I say, it's just a popcorn movie.
Hmm.
I think my favorite Dracula is the 1978 with Frank Langella. Was one of the best
Hmm.
Draculas, and even better than Coppola's, I think. Um,
Oh,
and as much as I
okay.
like Coppola and Gary Oldman, this one, I mean, you had Frank Langella as Dracula, you had Laurence Olivier as Van Helsing, Kate Nelligan plays Minna in it. Uh, it was just, and here again, for its time, you look at the effects, very well done. I mean, there's a scene where Dracula leaps out of a window and turns into a wolf. I mean, it's
Wow.
really well done. Uh,
And it's obviously practical effects because
yeah,
CGI wasn't
yeah, because you
invented
didn't
back
have
then.
CGI back then. It's like this is really well done. But I thought, and it really presented Dracula as the sex symbol. That.
Mm.
But I'll tell you one I did enjoy. I don't know if you saw Midnight Mass, the Netflix series.
I heard of it, but I haven't watched it yet because I
That
normally
was,
don't
I
watch
mean,
horror movies
that was a
or
very
series.
interesting vampire series. Um, I think it was too long. I think you could have cut out one episode, but because it does get a little didactic at times, but still, it was very interesting and a nice payoff at the end, I thought. So, uh, anyway, but
Have
yeah, that's the.
you heard of the Anne Rice books?
Oh yeah. I read the original, The Interview with Vampire. I'm not a big horror fan. I don't read a whole lot of that.
Me too, but I like the series on, where was it?
And
Um,
I gotta say,
AMC.
the Interview with a Vampire was one of the most erotic novels I ever read in my life. I mean,
Yeah,
she
and the
really did.
series adaptation was as erotic as you could like
Oh, okay,
imagine.
yeah, but well, I think that's what made it so good. By the way, another good vampire movie is the Let the Right One In. Um,
Mm.
I mean, to me, the I guess it's the Swedish version is the original. Uh, I immediately bought a copy of that. That was so well done. Uh, but here again, I'm not big on horror. I find it interesting at times, but once again, it's got to be well done. Um,
So you're so you're like, okay, I watch a movie and then like, but it has to be well done. Before that,
yeah,
I'm
of
not
course.
going to watch it. But which I
Like,
get, but sometimes you just watch. Basically, I'm like that. I watch a movie and then I'm like, it was so exhausting. Like, why?
oh yeah,
Why did? Because I watch movies and TV shows for my podcast, so I can talk about it. But I'm before I start this podcast, I was a movie fanatic, and I'm still one. And so I was like, I have to watch this movie, but do I want to watch this movie? No. Do I have to watch this movie? Yes.
I'll give you
So,
now. Here's one where I can give you a real good compare and contrast. Okay,
mm,
um, I went to see when it came out. I went to see The Last Temptation of Christ.
mm.
Uh, which the biggest sin in that was that it made Jesus boring. I mean, how the hell do you make Jesus boring? It's a great story. I mean, you got the best material in the world to work with. It's
Yeah.
the only Scorsese movie I didn't like. Well, I'm not really fond of The Irishman either. I thought
Yeah, I
he just
mean, me
ripped off.
neither. Me neither. It was,
Well, he ripped off a bunch of stuff he'd already done, put it in there, and just made it go on too
mm,
long. But I was actually bored during The Last Temptation of Christ. And that's like a typical 2 hour movie, but it was just, I was like, oh, this thing is just terrible. Uh, then I go see Peter Jackson's King Kong,
oh
nearly
my God.
nearly 3 hours long,
But
and I just I
so
was like,
good.
this is great. And that, by the way, and there you go. That's something I failed to bring up earlier. Here's how I judge a movie. It's
Okay.
called the butt. I call it the butt test. If I
Oh.
can feel my butt while I'm watching the movie, it's not going well. Because I think a good
Oh.
movie takes you out of your body and puts you in
Mhm.
another place. So if I'm squirming
Yeah.
around in the seat, I'm like, yeah, this thing, it ain't going for me. It's
Or
just not
like,
working.
I do this thing when I'm watching a movie and then I'm like, okay, it's kind of getting boring. I'm like thinking like, okay, what do I have to do?
Yeah, what's
Like,
my shopping list for tomorrow?
or yeah, or like, okay, like, do I have to like, I don't know, like, what should I cook or something? Because it's,
Yeah.
I, I don't
Well,
like.
like I say, I just call it the butt test. If you're feeling your butt,
Mm,
you're not in the
I think
movie.
I'm the same with my leg. Like when my leg falls asleep,
Yeah,
I fall asleep. Um, I'm like, okay, it's boring.
yeah, yeah. But and Das Boot is another one. It's 3 an hour, 3:20. It's 3 hours and 20 minutes long. I had no problem sitting through it. I'll,
Mm. I was the same
it's
with
one of them.
Batman, with the Batman,
Oh,
by
the new
Matt
one.
Reeves. Yeah,
Yeah, that was kind of long. It was very well done. I thought he did a good job with that
I love
one.
the darkness in it, like the
Yeah.
how dark the story was.
Hmm.
Anyways,
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for doing this.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well,
Um,
thank you. when you get this done, please let me know. I'd love
I
to
will I
see.
will release it tonight.
Oh, really?
And
Okay, man, you're quick.
yeah. Yeah. I usually don't cut anything out, but if you want me to cut certain things out, then I
Well,
gladly.
whatever's boring, and there's a lot here that is boring, so feel free.
Well, that's your judgment.
It's your product to, do with what you will. But anyway,
Okay. Thank
but
you so
yeah,
much for
thanks a lot. But
doing
this was
this.
fun, and if you ever want me to have me back on to talk movies, always happy to do. I'm a big movie buff. Like I say, I just love talking about
Yeah, I saw like I knew when I saw a request, I was like, okay, we're going to have fun.
it.
I
Well, I
wish you
can
a
give you
great
one topic
day.
I do love is defending movies that got buried under big names.
Let's do that on like the next time where
Yeah,
we
sometime in the future,
the
let's set it up. We'll
yeah.
do that. Sounds good.
And sorry
All
for the
right.
inconvenience with the
No,
links.
yeah, that's fine. We'll figure it out next time.
Yeah,
But anyhow,
I wish you a
all
great
right.
day, and
Yeah.
uh,
Well, you
I
have a
don't
good
know.
one, and I've
Thank
given
you
you a
so
list of
much.
new movies to check out. So
Yes,
hopefully
thank you so much for
next
those.
time we meet, you can tell me what you thought of them.
I will definitely. And I think next time I think we did 3 hours, but I don't know, like when I'm inviting guests like you, like who can talk and talk and talk, I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't wanna, I don't wanna like be disrespectful, but I have to like cut, there's this cutting aspect and this releasing aspect.
Oh yeah.
But I guess the next time will be longer than 3 hours, so just be prepared.
Sounds good. All right. Well, I'll catch up with you later then. You have a
All
good
right,
one.
thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye bye.